Hi, I'm Glenna Gustafson, and I would like to share with you how students, pre-service students in my elementary education teaching and learning math use children's literature in making math and global connections. This was a semester-long project. We began at the beginning of the semester by exploring global themes and using the framework from Project Zero as our framework for global competency, with those big items being communication, perspective taking, investigation, and taking action. We began our study by looking at the book If the World Were a Village. We read this book aloud and identified the math concepts. Hi, I'm Glenna Gustafson, and I want to share with you how pre-service teachers in my teaching and learning elementary mathematics class used children's literature to make math and global connections. We began our class by talking about what global connections were and what global competencies were. We used the framework provided by Project Zero, and we focused on the four main domains within that program of taking perspective, communication, investigation, and taking action. Those provided a nice broad structure for us to use as we began exploring literature throughout the course. And of course we integrated the math topics of number sense, number operations, geometry, measurement, probability, algebra. Our first exploration was using this particular piece of children's literature, If the World Were a Village. It's a wonderful story that involves taking that 66 billion number of residents in the world and taking them down into thinking about them being a village of 100 people. The book represents a variety of global themes, including education, economics, healthcare, and environment and sustainability. Schooling is another theme that is discussed in this book, and for each theme, the author breaks down by continent the number of people from that continent that would be represented if we were just a village of 100. This allows the most obvious global connections being identifying places on a map, and then going even further in depth and talking about specific countries and what would be found in specific countries for each one of these themes. And then the math is the math connections for this particular book evolved around statistics, ratios, percentages, and creating picture graphs. One of the activities that we did was we formed groups, and each group was given 100 sticky notes that were of different colors, and they were to choose and represent one of the themes visually. They then investigated that theme a little bit more further, so they learned more about that particular theme. And then we looked at each theme and discussed the perspective that was missing from that particular theme. So this was a wonderful introduction to the book. Throughout the semester, we used other pieces of children's literature to guide our exploration of how we identify global themes in children's literature. We began our next discussion with My Granny Went to Market. This is a story that where a grandmother travels all around the world and collects items. The math connections are very obvious as far as counting and simple addition problems. The global themes are numerous because she travels to all 7 continents. We also talked about with this book this idea of family and the importance of grandparents and cultures where grandparents are honored. We talked about how we could discuss and learn more with our students about some of the items that grandmother connects on her or collects on her trip. Another book that we used is Spaghetti and Meatballs for All, which is a story about a family dinner, and that is one thing that we noted was that many of the texts that we used did have this idea of family and the importance of family, culture, and community, especially in elementary school, is something that should be explored more. This particular book is focused on a dinner that is being planned. So there are multiplication arrays, perimeter, and area, trying to find a place to have this dinner. Then my students talked about the importance of food and when people gather around food and how we could explore that more. Taking action for this particular book, some of the things that the students came up with for that particular area might be looking at places where there's food scarcity and what a family dinner might look like in a place that where food was scarce. Another title that we used was Measuring Penny. Of course, Measuring Penny, at first glance, you don't have an automatic idea of what perhaps would be a global connection. The math connection is pretty obvious, but the math connection is also what leads to the global connection, because the global connection here is learning more about the metric system versus the standard system, what countries utilize that, what are the advantages and the disadvantages of using such systems, why countries use those, what's the cultural or the societal way of measurement in certain countries would be another exploratory topic for that book. So we looked at a variety of texts through the semester, and we talked for each text and identified math connections based on content and based on SOL and Common Core standards, as well as looking for the global connections using our 4 big pieces of global competencies. The perspective. Students were then asked to get into collaborative groups. Those groups then chose a piece of children's literature, one that fit their specific grade level. They identified, after reading the book, the math content areas, the SOL and the Common Core standards that would go along with that particular text. They also identified and talked about activities that could be utilized with the text as far as communicating, taking perspective, investigating, and taking action. And they put all this together into a PowerPoint. And then they utilized this to present at the online Global Education Conference. They shared their selection of literature as well as the math and the global connections, and it was very well received. There are examples of some of the conference presentations that are on the second video.